And now, ReclinerMedia.com presents The Stalking Dead with Mark Saxton and Michael Spillane.
Watching him trying to struggle to say, Maggie, I'll find you. Absolutely soul crushed.
Now, Mark and Michael are on.
Welcome into the Stalking Dead here, ReclinerMedia.com and the Recliner Media Network. We are on episode 4 of the OG series. We only got 2 episodes left in this first season, so we're almost done with the first season, flying right by here on the Stalking Dead. And Mark Saxton, Michael Spillane with you. Mark, how the heck are you?
I'm good, man. Excited. I'm like I said, this assignment's got to be one of my favorites. Getting to relive this. The nostalgia is real.
Yeah. Really quickly before we dive in to the play-by-play, if you will, of the episode, have you watched the show From yet?
I have not.
Oh, it's so good. So I started watching a couple episodes the other night. I fell asleep like during the 3rd episode, but it's really good. And it's funny because like the main character, sheriff dude, it reminded me of Walking Dead too, because the main dude's a sheriff, but the guy who plays the sheriff is this dude Michael from Lost, and we all know how the whole Lost adventure I went into also. So it's on like MGM Plus, which I didn't know existed until that moment. And then, but I guess you can watch like the first season for free on Prime, but then you can like rent the episodes or download the episodes. I don't know, but I am going to get through the first season. It's really good. So I would highly recommend. I might put that on our wheel review wheel for the other show.
I like that.
Yeah,
like
it's really good. Crazy storylines in there, and it's only been, well, I only made it through like 2.5 episodes. But back to our story here again. Walking Dead Rewatch Podcast. We are in season 1, episode 4. This one's titled Vatos. So we will get into who, what, where, said the name of the episode, and stuff and things, and then overall thoughts of episode 4, Mark, here as we get well, we see without really spoiling what we're going to get into, what was just your overall thoughts without getting too specific?
You know, this was man, I think another great addition to the first filler episode. And like I said, I even hate calling that, episode 3 a filler episode, but I love how they added the details to this side quest, finding Merle. So I enjoyed it. I think, like I said, once again, and this is going to be a biased opinion, and I'm going to probably nail this point every episode, but I really enjoy the writing and the storyline and the additional plot points that they put in.
Yeah, this one is we'll get into it, but this one is a major, I don't want to say course corrector, but this one is a major timeline shift. This is a major major plot thickening story, as well as we'll see why towards the end of the episode. But getting into the play-by-play, this episode starts out with Amy and Andrea just chilling in a boat, floating in the quarry. I don't even know what do you call a body of water in the middle of a quarry? Is it just a lake?
And
or
how does it still have fish?
Pond? Yeah, I don't know. But it is the zombie apocalypse, so I guess anything can happen at this point. But they are floating in a boat, Dale's boat, and they're just kind of conversating, discussing their dad. They kind of get into that. They're 12 years apart, so their dad taught them different things, mostly knots and tying knots and what to use to catch fish, and just how he was different raising both of them. Dale watches them and Jim. Now this is a very Jim heavy episode, but Dale's on top of the RV like he normally is, watching them, and then watching Jim dig a bunch of holes, and that's when we cut to the opening sequence. But why is Jim digging these holes? Everybody thinks. Back on the roof, that's where we kind of left the last episode, where we saw Merle's hand, and Daryl gets pissed off and points his it. And we've maybe the first time we've seen really the crossbow get pointed at somebody. he did shoot the walker when we saw the first introduction of Daryl in this season, but it points his infamous crossbow at T-Dog because we all know T-Dog even admitted that he dropped the keys, and then Rick, of course, points his gun at Daryl, and then Daryl kind of seems like Daryl of the Dixons have kind of the most reason, will actually listen to reason. Daryl wraps up Merle's hand. They follow the blood of Merle to another door, which we didn't know really existed, that door, until this episode. And they just kind of follow that trail of blood down some stairs, and it keeps switching between. I don't even know what the A storyline is. I would guess the A storyline is. It's a tough one. It's almost a toss-up what the A and B storyline is. Is the A storyline Rick in the group trying to find Merle, or is it back at camp where we're trying to figure out what the hell's going on with Jim?
I think I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna take the under there. I think the A storyline follows Rick, and the B storyline is everybody else, just because the show started with Rick. At this point in time, I'm gonna call the Rick side the point A show.
Yeah, it's almost a toss-up because it switches back and forth so much.
It's kind of a tie now.
Yeah, in this episode, so it's kind of hard to follow which is A and B. But anyway, again, they follow the blood and they start heading down a staircase, and then it switches back once again back to Jim digging the holes. Dale rolls up with the canteen and questions why, and it's no explanation at this point. And then of course maybe I don't know if there is a C storyline, but then Amy and Andrea come back with a bunch of fish to camp. It didn't really show how they caught this fish. All they said, they kind of left it at Andrea saying, "Hey, you got a bite," and everyone's excited, and Morales is like, "Because of you, my kids will eat tonight," and everyone's excited. Lori, of course, is grossed out, but she will take some free fish. Dale, in the meantime, comes back and says, "Hey, we may have a bit of a problem," and points to Jim up on the hill, digging the holes. And then, of course, we switch back to Rick and Daryl and gang, and they run into the oven that was turned on. So Merle, being the kind of survivalist that if based on what we know about the Dixons, they're pretty good at surviving on their own. So Merle did cauterize his stump, if you will, with the burner on the stove. So I guess that is a good thing. And yeah, and then we just kind of go back to argue, bicker on we should go get the guns. No, hell with that. We're going to get Merle and stuff like that. Yeah, you could tell Daryl actually kind of, like I said, listens to reason, and he says, "Hey, let's get the guns first and do this." And Daryl's like, "All right, I can live with that." And then, they go with what Rick suggested. And then, of course, it goes back to the camp. Shane now questions Jim. Shane, obviously the, I guess, leader that we kind of thrust him in that position. Shane now questions Jim. Jim doesn't stop. And Shane's like, "Listen, dude, give me the shovel." And then Jim's like, "No." And then, of course, Shane kind of tackles him in a more concerned. This isn't Shane being pissed off, like beating the shit out of Ed, but it was Shane tackling Jim just to get him to stop, because he might hurt himself. And even Jim brings up Ed and says, "Or what? Are you gonna beat my face in like Ed Peltier? You all saw it, right?" And they kind of get into that kind of morale police discussion as well, because they're like, "Hey, he wasn't treating his wife right." And then of course Jim, maybe this is just a Southern thing, I don't know, Mark, but of course Jim's like, "That's their marriage, that ain't his." And then we kind of questioned that last episode, like, was Shane in the right here? So maybe it's a Southern thing. Maybe you just let families beat the hell out of each other. I don't know. But again, I think we both agreed that Shane did the right thing. Back, of course, in the office building, what it seems look like after seeing some of the rooms that they go into, they let Glenn make the plan. Glenn obviously is the expert, for lack of a better term, in knowing the streets, knowing the alleyways. He even draws out a map on the floor and uses different things to point out where. He goes, "If I get cut off here, I'll double back this alley, so I got both of you guys like covering me." So it's funny. This is one of the more funnier episodes in season one. I mean, we mentioned all the funny quotes, and he goes, "Hey kid, what'd you do before this?"
Yeah.
And Glenn's like, "I was a pizza delivery guy," and Daryl just nods, no response. He just kind of nods his head as if to say, "Oh, touche." And yeah, and then we kind of fast forward to them, executing the plan in action. Now we're in the thick of it. We're in the streets. We're in alleys. We're behind dumpsters, and Glenn gets ready to move. And one of my favorite quotes, maybe of all time, from Daryl in any season, any series, is, "You got some balls for a Chinaman," and
Like, I'm Korean.
Glenn responds, "I'm Korean." He goes, "Whatever." Yeah, one of my favorite exchanges for both of those guys. And then Glenn obviously makes a dash for the guns, and then a couple seconds later, someone's walking up, and it's this dude Miguel, and part of the crew that they kind of get tangled up with here because they both spotted the guns. A bunch of Vatos run up in the alley and start beating the hell out of Daryl, and then they kind of get Glenn out of there, and then T-Dog and Rick finally catch up, and then Daryl shoots the homeboy in the ass with an arrow, and they escape or they don't. I guess they escape, but they do leave with Glenn. So they kind of take Glenn hostage because they weren't able to leave with Miguel. So they were like, "We'll get one guy we'll make an exchange later." They did not bring the guns, so the guns are with Rick. So at least we know where the guns are. And so, yeah, that was one of the first times we're starting to see a new groups introduced. Obviously, it's only episode 4 of season 1, but maybe this is the point in time of the series where, like, hey, this might go somewhere. We can start bringing in new groups.
Yeah, and honestly, it happened in very, very much so as we're starting to learn Walking Dead fashion. Very much kick in the door, very fast, get kicked in the teeth, chaos, 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 and then boom, confusion on what to do next. And one of the homeboys that he always plays, kind of that Mexican gangster cholo in everything he does. This actor, and I wish I knew his actual name. But does a phenomenal job once again. I really like his acting and everything he's done because he fits it well. He really does. But getting shot in the ass kind of reminded me of the Bruce Almighty when he had what's it, the bees or something fly out of his ass. So he had that same facial expression, kind of a little funny. But I was going to ask you about that particular part, right? So we all know Daryl, and if you're new to the show, let's just pretend it's your first time watching, right? You've seen him, that he's already a hunter. Obviously, for that you have to have some skill, a good shot. Why the ass? Why not the kill shot there?
I think that it was just to slow him down. I don't think, and I don't know. I don't think Daryl was. If Daryl wanted to kill him, I think he could have. I think it was just to slow him down so they could maybe find out who these guys are, or interrogate him or something like that. I mean, if he wanted to shoot him, and I honestly don't remember what Daryl was doing in that moment. I don't know if he was still kind of wrestling with somebody, but if he wanted to do the kill shot, I believe he could. He's already pretty much a pro with the crossbow at this point. So I think it was just to slow him down and get to kind of figure out who these guys are. So seconds later, they bring Miguel back up into, again, what looks like an office building, and they're kind of interrogating Miguel and stuff like that. And it's so funny. Again, the dialogue in these scenes, he goes, "We need to find Merle," and he goes, "What kind of name?" And Miguel's like, "What kind of name is Merle? I wouldn't name my dog Merle." Oh man, it's one of the first times we hear this dude talk, full sentences, otherwise yelling in the alley, and he just says, I wouldn't name what kind of redneck hick name is that? I wouldn't name my dog Merle." So Daryl's just losing frustration every second. Rick has to calm him down, and then Daryl, he gets the hand out of his bag, and he goes, "You know what happened to the last guy that pissed me off?" And threw his hand onto his lap. So again, just classic.
This time I'm going to start at the feet.
Yeah, this classic Daryl Daryl moves. So they kind of get their act together. They go to this structure, this building, where the Vatos live and dwell, I guess. They bring Miguel. They bring the bag of guns, although they don't bring the bag of guns with them to the door. They have T Dog bring it up on the roof. We'll mention that later. And then this one homie opens the door, and they kind of negotiate, and then Hector comes out, and he's the one who got shot in the butt with the arrow. And they're both kind of just ready to shoot each other, except for the main dude. And they talk. Nothing really gets resolved because they don't have the bag of guns and stuff like that. So nothing gets resolved in this scene. And Miguel's like, "Come on, man! Like, take me back." And then, of course, you see all the cholos at the door just waiting to pop off. They got crowbars, they got bats, they got guns, they got knives. I don't want to say this episode is super stereotypical, but I mean, when you name the episode Vatos and there's a bunch of Latino homies, that's I don't know. I don't know how PC this episode would have been in today's age. This episode came out in like 2010. So they saw T-Dog with the gun on top of the roof, and then they go up on top of another roof, and they have Glenn. They're like, we'll throw him off and stuff like that. And so they kind of get their act together. They're like, hey, bring back the guns and we'll talk. So they go back to the office building. They kind of renegotiate with themselves. Daryl again has to slap Miguel and say, are you even part of this conversation? Like, it's just funny. Just the back and forth, the dialogue. And then, of course, we go back to the structure. They bring Miguel. He's all taped up. Everyone's kind of about to shoot each other. And then this sweet little old abuela comes walking in and says, please don't take him to jail and stuff like that. Obviously, she thinks he's a real cop because of Rick wearing the sheriff uniform. And so that kind of halts it. But before that, another funny quote. And I forgot the lead dude's name. Oh man, I forgot his name. The lead guy who's kind of in charge of all the Vatos and stuff like that. But he says, I was gonna cut him up, and I got my dogs. I bought my dogs from Satan at a yard sale. Like, it's just some funny quotes. And the sweet little grandma comes up and says, no, please don't. And he needs to take his medicine. And so everyone just kind of, drops arms because they don't want to get the sweet old grandma involved. She takes Rick's hands, walks all of them. And then as they're walking, you kind of see, I don't know if this was like a nursing home or an old folks home or whatever it is. It was obviously converted into that. And I don't know if it was originally, but it might have been because of, and then we eventually walk into what looks like, kind of almost a gymnasium. Like it could have been a school, maybe it looks like as well. But you walk into, I don't know if your school had this growing up, Mark, but the gym, the cafeteria, and like the theater were all the same place, and that's what this kind of looked like. Yeah. As they walked in. There's a bunch of tables. It looks like there's a stage in the background. There's bookshelves, cafeteria tables. Looks like a cafeteria. And then as they walk in there, we finally spot Glenn. And this old person's having a hard time breathing. And Hector, the guy who got shot with the arrow, gives him his inhaler. And then we glance over and see 3 little chihuahuas in a bed. Those are the hell minions that the lead guy was talking about. So yeah, what was your overall thought of kind of, I guess, grandma being the I don't even know what you call her, just making everybody kind of calm down, put their guns down. And then obviously once Rick saw what kind of this place is and how they're taking care of older folks, they kind of have a change of heart too.
So it's funny, I am Latino, so I do understand how it is when the abuelita comes out, and she's the law. Whatever she says goes. So, there was an old joke, it's like it's you'd rather face her than Satan himself. You know what I mean? So it's kind of funny how that kind of came into play. So I enjoyed that, little comedic relief. And you know, I think it was Daryl in that when she first showed up. I think it was Daryl. Is get grandma out of the line of fire. Like we're ready to fight, you know.
Yeah.
So I thought that was that was good. But you know, going back to the first time that I watched this episode, I was shocked. I was like, man, you know, I guess we were, as the audience, you're so caught up on the kill or be killed survival attitude that, you know, it was kind of a breath of fresh air to watch these guys kind of come together and, you know, create a community that, you know, to try and preserve life and you know, make you know, quality life as well, with the medicine, you know, or what's left of it. I also thought it was funny when, you know, when T Dog came in and Glenn's like, "What are you guys doing here?" He goes, "Man, we thought you were getting eaten by dogs." Like
He's like,
that
those
was
dogs,
one of
yeah.
my yeah, that was one of my favorite quotes. And then, you know, seeing the Chihuahuas start barking. Um, but yeah, I think, like I said, a good little side quest. You know, writing in and I like how that played out, and even more so, I like the talk that Rick had with the leader, and I too forgot his
Yeah,
name.
it's Guillermo.
Thank you. There you go. So I like the talk that he had with Guillermo. He's like, you know, like, because you know what we would have done to you, because we would have fought you just like, you know, we fought others. And he talked about the plunderers, you know, and so for me, that whole part, like I said, was a breath of fresh air. You know, you got to kind of see the humanitarianism, if that's how you say that word,
Sure.
if you will, kind of in that, in the midst of chaos.
Yeah, and then during that conversation that you're talking about, he goes, you know, Rick's like, "What are you, doctors?" And he goes, "No, Hector's a nurse." And he goes, "Oh, what are you then?" He goes, "I'm a custodian." And it's just kind of funny how, you know, it doesn't matter what you were in the life before, you know, and the custodian of what seems to be a nursing home and stuff like that kind of took charge when maybe nobody else wanted to. You wouldn't have, again, this episode's almost like judging books by its cover. You never would have thought Hector was a nurse and stuff like that. And so um yeah, like I said, kind of stereotypical, but it kind of breaks that stereotype once you find out what these guys are doing, you know, helping the old folks and stuff like that, and things of that nature. So then they kind of squash the beef, if you will. Rick, you know, they go to seems like a more secluded little room or something like that, and you know, he goes, you know, just tell me what's up. And this, I mean, Guillermo says the name of the episode multiple times during this scene. He goes, you know, the Vatos trickle in and out. You know, Vatos go and scavenge. So he says it a whole bunch of times. So there is your name of the episode. And then, you know, Rick kind of was like, all right, you know, they're doing good things here. Like maybe we can use them as allies in the future. Unfortunately, spoiler alert, this is the first and last time we see this group, which I'm kind of sad about because I love Guillermo's character. Hector, obviously, he's been in a bunch of stuff, like you said, almost playing the same type of character and everything. But it's kind of sad that they never really circled back to the Vatos, really, the Vatos gang. And so, you know, again, beef is kind of squashed. Rick opens the bag and gives them a lot of guns, practically half of the guns. But it was for a good cause, and like you said, it shows the humanity in the episode, and I'm glad Rick did that. Do you agree with even though we never see this group again, which I'm kind of sad about? Are you glad, or are you how do you feel about Rick giving them again basically half the guns that they had?
Yeah, Rick's a stand-up guy. I agree with that move. The same way that I agreed with the move, like when you know, another part that we kind of skipped over that I wanted to talk about was when Daryl came in and he was like, "Is this is this Asian kid or whatever he said even worth it? You know, all those lives or all those guns equal a life. All those lives worth this one kid's life." And Rick, you know, was like, "Hey, you know, he saved my life. He saw me in the tank. He could have walked away. He chose not to." It kind of shows that same thing that Rick does for this group, where it's like, "Hey, these people need help. This is the right thing to do. They're hurting for, I mean, a bunch of different resources, but you know, guns are good to come by, and like Daryl said, a gun is as good as a life in that situation." So very much stand up guy kind of thing, where he was like, "You know what, here, we're not going to fight over this anymore. You know, protect yourselves and keep doing the right thing, keep fighting the good fight," kind of thing. So I enjoyed that part.
Yeah, and then after he gives the guns, the crew plus Glenn now, they get Glenn back, obviously, walk back outside, back to the truck or the van, whatever you want to call it. They realize the truck is no longer there. And he goes, hey, where's the truck? And then, of course, Rick automatically goes to Merle. And it could have been, I mean, it could have been anyone really at this point. Could have been hell, the smart walkers that we've experienced get behind the wheel and drive off at this point. And then we switch back to the camp. Andrea's kind of going through the RV, kind of looking for something to give. If you remember back, maybe the episode or two ago, she got a necklace for Amy, because today this episode is actually her birthday and stuff like that. So she was looking for something to clasp it or something like that. We see Ed laying in the tent. Carol's like, hey, we're going to the fish fry, you coming? And he's basically screw all those people and stuff like that. And then we get a glimpse of Daryl, T-Dog, Rick, and Glenn running back to the camp. It's dark. I don't know why they couldn't find another car, so that was kind of interesting how they, I guess, had to run back to the camp when I mean, I don't want to say that part bothered me, but you really couldn't find a 4-person car in the city that you were just in.
And they just found one the 2 episodes prior, or the episode prior.
Yeah,
that was
I mean, there's cars aplenty right now.
Galore. Yeah.
So that was kind of
if you remember correctly, didn't he say the Vatos would work on the rides so they could talk about driving the old people out to the country and stuff like that? And
yeah,
so I'm sure we could.
I mean, it could have been a fraction of the Vatos who took the truck. I don't know. So then we get to the fish fry. Everyone's eating. Everyone's having a good time, and they bring up Dale's watch. He wears it, and they're like, it doesn't work. You keep winding it every day. And he goes, hey, we need to keep a semblance of what life was before this. And my watch kind of reminds me of the life that was and stuff like that. So, they kind of talk about good times and stuff like that. Amy gets up, and Andrea's like, where are you going? She goes, I got to use the restroom. And this is where basically all hell ensues. We go back to Ed, and he thinks someone's trying to come in the tent, maybe bring him some food or stuff like that. He zips open the door, and surprise, it's a walker at his front door. Amy comes out of the RV. She asks, hey, we're out of toilet paper, stuff like that. She gets taken down by a walker. More walkers go into Ed's tent. I don't want to say Amy had it coming, but Ed definitely had this death coming. So Ed only made it
justice.
Yeah, Ed only made it 4 episodes into season 1. Amy as well. She gets bit on the wrist. Everyone starts freaking out at this point as dozens of walkers start entering the camp now. Shane, of course, whips out his gun, starts shooting. Rick and the gang hears it. They run faster up the hill. Jim's taking them out with a bat. Morales is taking walkers out with the bat. Andrea's freaking out. She's trying to run to Amy. And obviously it is weird because Amy's literally crouched over Amy for Andrea's literally crouched over Amy the rest of this episode. And it seems like the walkers aren't even fazed by someone just sitting there. Unless because they bit Amy. So they're like, oh, that we already took care of that area. That square footage is good. But they are making their way back they're kind of backing up to the RV, try to get the RV to their backs. At this point, Rick and the gang finally show up. Rick's shooting. Carl runs into his arms. And then we see Amy and the devastation and Andrea. And again, she just can't leave her little sister. So she's basically with her the entire rest of the episode. And then kind of a spooky scene, if you will, spooky couple seconds. It pans to Jim, and Jim's like, I remember my dream now, why I dug the holes. Like, did he foresee, like, is Jim psychic or something? That was kind of weird.
Yeah, no, I like that. It was eerie. It did kind of fall into, he was freaking out. What I wish it would have explained a little bit better why the freak out plus I get that, he was almost, full heat stroke, but I wish it could have explained, the absence of the mind for a little while on the trauma that hit him, and why, and kind of connected the two things together. But I do love the eerie kind of spookiness that it had at the end. But one thing that kind of pissed me off, I feel like Amy could have dodged that walker. Like she just had her arm on the
Yeah,
wall
on the
of the
door
door,
for
on
a
the
couple
frame of the
seconds.
door.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like look, we won. You know what I mean? Just that. So I just wish if she's gonna die, they could have made it to where it was kind of a little less escapable, if you will. But um, other than that, yeah, I mean, I loved the action of the once again the chaos, and your leaders are going to do leader things in this show, the heroes are going to do hero things, and kind of just watching how everybody went straight to protecting each other. I was kind of wondering if it was going to be noticed how much Shane was really protecting Lori and Carl, so because he went straight to them like a husband and a father would have done. So he's still kind of ensuing that act, if you will. But yeah, definitely a good episode.
Yeah, he's definitely still in dad mode, if you will. So, yeah, and then of course it pans to Jim, and he goes, "I remember my dream now. Why I dug the holes." And then that's the end of the episode. And so we're left with a sort of a cliffhanger. Obviously, we lose two characters in this episode. We lose Ed again, had it coming probably, and Amy, who one simple arm motion and she survives, I guess. But again, you tell these stories to write characters in and out of the shows, and there has to be drama, I guess. There has to be, like you mentioned, chaos. So, I guess your thoughts on the characters we lost in this episode. Obviously, I would have loved to see Ed a little bit more, and just to see how his personality and obviously his just the way he interacts with the group. I wish we would have saw a little bit more interaction besides the throwing the wood on the fire, what we saw by the water when the ladies were doing laundry and stuff like that, and then obviously not wanting to join the group. I mean, if he would have joined the group, he probably would have survived also. So what did you think of? Are these characters you would have liked to seen more of interact throughout the season, throughout the show, or was this a good time for both of them to get the hell out?
Definitely a good time for Ed, not just because I hated his character, but because he was, I mean, man, he was such an ass just right off the bat. There was no kind of flashbacks or more detail as to why he was the way that he was. Like it just, boom, he's an asshole. So definitely good to see him go quickly. Amy, I feel like, the sister story and kind of how that kind of started to unfold. I kind of wish she would have lasted a little bit longer, because I think that would have played well in future episodes when it comes to the family things. But ultimately, I think you nailed it on the head a couple of minutes ago, where these writers write these things in, and some of them's got to go. It is what it is.
Yeah, you gotta go. All right, well, let's get into stuff and things, as this is kind of where compare what the difference is between the show and what's in the comic books, the graphic novels, if you will. So it's obviously sometimes hard to decipher what's the end of an episode in the comics. We kind of left off in the comics that, Rick's like, hey, there were walkers in the group. We got to move camp. Rick disagrees. There is no city storyline in the comics at this point. So they're all kind of sitting around the fire. It looks like wintertime, by the way, because it looks like it's snowing. So everybody's kind of bundled up. Again, they're talking over the fire. They are having a fish fry and stuff like that. And then same kind of thing. Amy gets up and says, I got to go to the bathroom. And same thing. She comes out the RV, and she doesn't really get a chance to say anything. But she does come out, and it is funny because in the comic they make the walker look like 100 feet away, just kind of like they did in the show. But you do see like a walker hand closer. So it is almost, I don't know if you could see it, but she is coming out of the RV right there. You can kind of see the walker in the background and then the hand in the foreground. And then she gets bit in the neck as opposed to the arm in the comic. So she goes down. Everybody's freaking out. Rick, obviously, again, there is no city storyline like downtown Atlanta. So Rick's in the group. So, you know, everybody's shooting all different kinds of areas and stuff like that. Again, there is no Ed in the comics either. So we don't see Ed get taken out. And, you know, everybody, it's kind of the same thing. Everybody's going everywhere. But in the comic, Carl has a gun and starts shooting some walkers. So,
talking about.
There you go. You can see him right there
Carl.
with the gun, taking out a walker. Lori's like,
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so Coral becomes even he's got the hat on already. And then we see Jim get taken down. Just kind of like the show, we don't really see where or when he got the scratch. And then kind of it kind of goes on and says, except it was Lori that says, Jim, oh my God, you've been bitten. And Jim's like, just a scratch, you know, paying no mind to, but it's almost the same setup right there. You can see Jim kind of looks like spitting image of the actor they used in the show. So it looks like they had a funeral for Amy and stuff like that. And yeah, they just are kind of sitting around talking like, what should we do? What should we do? Meanwhile, just like in the show, Jim's in the RV trying to keep cool. You know, the fever starting to take over. Rick and Shane getting into an argument, and Shane goes, everything was perfect until you came back. And that's when it starts to get crazy. And, you know, kind of the same thing in the show, although they do this early in the comic. Spoiler alert, they live Jim out by a tree. But they don't drive away from him. They just walk him a little bit away from camp and just have him by a tree. Again, Rick and Shane get into an argument, basically saying, you know, let's move the camp and stuff like that. And Shane runs away from the camp, and they just, I mean, look at this face by Shane, by the way, just pissed off that Rick came back. Basically saying, listen, everything was perfect. Like I love Lori, I love Coral, and you just kind of ruined it by basically coming back to life. Do you want to know the spoiler in the comic at this juncture? Because this is where it really differs from the show.
I do.
So we don't see this until the next episode, but same kind of thing. Shane points the gun at Rick, and Rick's like, no, no, no. And then Shane gets a bullet through the neck. By who, you may ask? Coral. So Coral shoots Shane in the neck and kills him in the comic. So no more Shane, by the way.
Damn.
No more Shane. And
but in the show, he lasted 3 seasons, correct?
2.
2 was a 2.
Pretty much and maybe a season and a half. Yeah, he didn't make it to season 3, but we'll obviously get into that. But yeah, Shane is dead in the comics already. Again, that could have been. It's hard to tell, obviously, where the comic leaves and the show picks up, but those are the similarities, the differences. So Shane is gone in the comics, and same kind of thing. Amy's gone in the comics. Jim, they already left by the tree. Spoiler alert. Again, we'll see that next episode in episode 5. But yeah, anything you want to comment on the comic versus the show?
You know, I feel like I said, I mean, they did a good job for adding the certain details to make the show kind of work for this first run, if you will, you know, because once again, like we've brought up before, there wasn't a promise of an actual series at this juncture of this project. So the additions that they made, you know, to the comic, I think were phenomenal, and they made it work out. And in some way, shape, or form, I like how they always make it connect, and you know, kind of pretty much for the most part, end how it's ended in the comic, if you will. Maybe getting there in different ways, or having a different outcome, or a different detail, but the same outcome. You know what I mean? So I've enjoyed that with this little venture into the comics. So that's been fun.
Yeah. So yeah, Coral takes him out as basically protecting his dad and stuff like that, and no more Daddy Shane, no more, I guess, awkward love triangle and third wheel and things of that nature. So that does it for Shane in the comics. I'm glad we get to experience more Shane in the show. Like I said, probably turning into my to the favorite villain, if you will. Although he is doing a lot of stuff to help the group, and like you said, throwing himself into the line of fire to protect not only Lori and Carl, but basically the entire camp. So, and now he's got a little chip on his shoulder, obviously, but I think he wants to prove to Rick that he can be a leader and stuff like that. I don't know. We don't really get obviously into what we saw in the very first pilot episode was, them kind of chowing down on some burgers and fries and talking about women, but we don't really get to see what kind of background they had together. And that's kind of a shame that we didn't really see a whole ton of flashbacks with them. We'll see a little bit more in season 2. And so that's what I'm kind of sad about, is we didn't get more flashbacks as them as good friends. So that was kind of a shame, but the story moves on, not for Shane in the comics, but yeah, I'm glad he makes it a little bit longer in the show.
Yeah, same. Like I said, I do like the details that they've added to make him last longer. But like you, I wish we would have seen some more flashbacks and some more details on the structure of their relationship. Typically, you're the more senior if you're driving in those shows, although in real departments in real life, it's different for different areas. Sometimes the more senior is the one who does passengers. Sometimes the more senior is the one who does drivers. So typically in TV shows, it's the driver who has the most seniority. So kind of makes you assume, but once again, you don't know.
Right. So we will find out what happens more in season 1, episode 5 will be the next episode, and that one is titled Wildfire. So that's probably, if the episode's any indication, like the name of the episode, then we're probably in for some more chaos. But that is going to do it for us here on the Stalking Dead. We just relived episode 4 of season 1 of The Walking Dead, Vatos. Again, super sad we don't get to see the Chodos and the Vatos anymore, but would have been cool to see them circle back at some point. As the seasons go on, Mark, the show does a good job of kind of that, bringing guys back into the fort. Obviously, you should know this by now. Obviously, we see Morgan later on, but we'll get into that when the time comes. But yeah, it's kind of sad, and obviously, will we ever see Merle again? That's kind of a question mark as well. But yeah, any final thoughts before we get on out of here?
No, like I said, just the nostalgia. It's funny watching the OG series again. It's kind of funny bringing back all those memories. So definitely enjoying it.
Yeah, what I loved about The Walking Dead is I was late to the party. Like, I didn't watch the first, I will say, season and a half when it was live on. When there's new episodes coming out each week when it very first started. So I was like a season and a half behind, and everyone kept talking about it. And so I don't even know what app it was or where I downloaded like one episode at a time, and I watched it like in a night, just a season and a half. Obviously the first season's only 6 episodes, but then ever since then, yeah, never missed the new episodes from there on out. But yeah, that was kind of my introduction, was just hearing about it. And then, yeah, before these came out, the compendiums, obviously there's hundreds of issues of the comic books, but you can get all of them in 4 compendiums like this, obviously a thick graphic novel. But I was downloading one comic at a time on the iPad too, from like a comic app that you can download. And they were like, I don't even know, 25 cents a piece. So it was cheap to read them. But then the compendiums came out, so that was cool. So that was kind of my first introduction of The Walking Dead. So that was cool.
I like it. Yeah, my first introduction was broke college student watching it on AMC, and as they were coming out, and I quit watching it pretty quick. So pretty much by the time you started watching it is by the time I quit. And just moving and doing college kid things and stuff like that. Didn't keep up with it, but when my wife and I first got together, it was funny. She would be finishing. She was like finishing the series at that time, and I had just not been able to watch. So it's kind of funny the difference in that. But yeah, I'm excited to actually watch it all the way through and finish it for the first time ever.
There you go. So we will see again as the season rolls on. We'll be back next week with episode 5 once again titled Wildfire. But for Mark Sexton, I am Michael Spillin. We will talk to you next week.